Have you ever noticed that no matter where you are in the world, the drivers from the state directly next to yours are clearly the worst drivers in the world? Or what about like at work, right? Like, yeah, our team has its flaws, but the other departments, they are clearly full of idiots. Sales thinks marketing is useless, engineering thinks product doesn't have a clue, and then nobody can get anything done. Well, unfortunately, this problem also plays out at the highest levels of American foreign power, right? See, the State Department thinks that the military is a bunch of uneducated brutes who break everything and then leave. And then the military thinks the State Department is full of stuck-up academics who spend all week debating which form of inaction they want to take. And the uncomfortable truth is that this dysfunction is pretty much baked into the human condition. See, we're hardwired to think that our group, our culture, our way of solving problems is the best. And everyone else, yeah, they're just clearly the problem. And nowhere is this more expensive, more consequential, and more absurd than when it comes to US foreign policy, where we spend more time fighting with ourselves than actually fighting the problem. So in the next 12 minutes, we're gonna dive into this idea and explore the framework that the US government is supposed to use for solving global problems, based on the 3 Ds of governance: defense, diplomacy, and development. These are 3 different tools with 3 different conflict styles, all designed to work together. But then we're going to discuss why these agencies really struggle to understand and work with each other based on personality clashes and fundamentally different objectives at the tactical and operational levels. And then finally, how do we pull ourselves as the individual out of this tunnel vision, see the bigger picture, and recognize that having different approaches isn't the problem, but actually one of our greatest strengths? Because here's the thing: whether you're in government, corporate America, or running your own team, this is the skill that separates people who get stuck and involved in the infighting from the exceptional individuals who actually lead. I'm Radar, and I've spent the past 10 years studying human behavior and analyzing conflicts all over the world, from universities to government agencies to even jumping out of airplanes with special operations. But what's my real expertise? That's turning complex problems into actionable solutions. My mission is to give you the most effective tools so that you can crush your own challenges and make a meaningful, positive impact on the world. So let's dive into it. Welcome to the Renegade Institute. So how useful would a toolbox be if all it had was 4 different types of hammers and nothing else? Not very useful, not very helpful, right? See, a good toolbox is gonna have a wide range of tools, all designed to take on different tasks, right? Well, the same is supposed to be true of our government. We have different agencies with different strengths and different focuses to give us a wide range of options for when it comes to solving global problems. And that's the theory behind the 3 Ds of governments that we have: defense, diplomacy, and development, or the idea of using what's called a whole of government approach. See, each agency has their own role, and they're intended to mutually support one another. So the first we have for defense, right? That was formerly the Department of Defense, now called the Department of War. This is our stick, right? This is basically the agency we use when we show up and we're like, hey, you're gonna do what we want or else, right? We use the Department of War to project military power, deter threats, and win conflicts. The whole purpose of it is to protect the US people and the Constitution of the United States. Basically, it's gonna show up and it's gonna break your things and ruin your day if you don't comply. Then next we have diplomacy, right? This is where the State Department's gonna step in. They are essentially our intermediary, the let's sit down and talk about things, building relationships and partnerships, and they wanna promote national interest through peaceful negotiation and diplomatic engagements. Basically, this is where we're gonna try and get what we want through charm, leverage, and unfortunately, endless meetings. Then this brings us to the last one, right? Development. Development's gonna be filled by the US Agency for International Development. Rest in peace, it got doged, it doesn't really exist anymore, but we're just gonna keep running with it, right? So basically, this agency is our carrot or our incentive. We're basically like, hey, if you work with us, we're gonna give you nice, shiny things, right? Like roads, schools, clean water, those kinds of things. And they focus on building strength of governance, reducing poverty, and supporting human dignity in other countries through the strategic employment of foreign aid and development projects. Each of these agencies ultimately embodies a different conflict style, giving us different tools for enacting U.S. foreign policy. This is going to be based on the 5 different conflict styles model. You may be familiar with this if you saw our different 5 conflict episode, but if not, here's a quick recap, right? So anytime you're approaching a conflict, there are 5 different strategies that you can employ depending upon 2 main factors: our need to maintain the relationship and our need to win the conflict, right? And so where you fall, depending upon those 2 parameters, determines which conflict style we're gonna employ. So when we look at this model, USAID, that's gonna cover the accommodating conflict style, right? Where we have a low need to win, but we have a high need to maintain the relationship. So basically we're gonna use USAID to give in and be like, hey, we're gonna give you some nice things if you will comply with us and give us these things on this other stuff. Whereas the Department of War, this is our agency for the competitive conflict style, right? This is where we have a really high need to win and we have a pretty low need to maintain that relationship, right? Basically, we show up and we're like, hey, this is super duper important to us and we're just straight up gonna fight you for it. We're not gonna negotiate, we're not gonna talk, we're just gonna take what we need. And then the last 2 are covered by the State Department, and that's gonna be the compromise and collaborative conflict styles, right? This is basically where we have a medium to high need to win, but also a medium to high need to maintain the relationship. Basically, we're like, hey, let's negotiate about this. We're gonna try and turn this, instead of it a you versus me, it's gonna be a you and me versus the problem. We're gonna try and use a collaborative way to solve these issues. So as we can see, each of these agencies are designed to give us a different tool or a different conflict strategy when it comes to enacting our global foreign policy. But as you may have seen, this is kind of where the tension begins to arise between these different agencies, right? So the Department of War, they have to win. That's their thing, right? That is like, we have a high need to win. We do not care about the relationship. The Department of War will gladly sacrifice the relationship with the other country in order to achieve the tactical and operational objectives. These are the people who see a problem, they want to crush it immediately. Planning is great, but execution is way better. Whereas the State Department, on the other hand, they're the opposite, right? Their number 1 priority is maintaining the relationship, maintaining those diplomatic ties, and they will often sacrifice smaller tactical and operational objectives to keep the higher level strategic diplomatic relations. And these are the people who can walk into a room of strangers, walk out with 3 new friends and a dinner invitation, right? And so because of these inverse priorities for these 2 agencies, we tend to see a lot of tension when these agencies need to play nicely together in other parts of the world. And this fundamental difference also leads to large personality differences of the employees, the individuals who are choosing to work at these different agencies. And so one way we can understand this is by looking at what's called the DISC model. So the DISC model breaks down 4 different personality types based off of their personality profiles. This is detailed and explained by Thomas Erickson in his book Surrounded by Idiots. But basically, the military is going to be predominantly populated by the red, dominance-driven personality types. Basically, these are your results-oriented, driven, competitive, like alpha individuals that want to show up, they want to get stuff done, they want to get it done quickly, and then they want to move on to the next challenge. Whereas the State Department is largely going to be filled with our influence or yellow type personalities, right? These are individuals who are persuasive, they're inspiring, they're enthusiastic, basically idealistic social butterflies. They love holding court, they like talking big grand ideas, they like making deals, and they like making friends, right? But this creates that strife between the agencies and their respective personnel when they need to work together in order to solve problems. See, the thing is, these 2 personality types have the biggest egos, and they think that their way is the best. And so what ends up happening is the State Department sees the military and they're just like, oh my gosh, you guys are a bunch of brutish, Uneducated bullies, you break things, you make a mess, and then you leave. And then the bill's on us to pick up the pieces and repair the relationships on the back end. Basically, State Department sees the military as that friend that always shows up at the party, gets drunk, starts a fight, breaks a bunch of things, Ubers his way home, and now you're stuck cleaning everything up and apologizing to everyone on their behalf, right? And so the State Department is also in the country for a lot longer than your typical Department of War employee, right? So the State Department as an individual is going to be in the country for 2 to 3 years per assignment. And so they're okay losing on smaller daily objectives as long as the relationship and diplomatic ties are maintained. And the State Department is also interacting with the host nation personnel on a daily basis. They spend a lot of time focused on that interpersonal relationship and is generally focused on the higher level strategic approaches, right? Whereas the military, on the other hand, they see the State Department as like ineffectual, risk-adverse, stuck-up, snobby, overeducated jerks, right? They often see State Department as being two-faced, they just get in the way, they're often indirect or inauthentic, and to the military, the State Department is like that coworker that like schedules a meeting to plan a meeting to discuss whether or not they even need a meeting in the first place. And the military hates this. They need to win the objective at all costs. They want to show up, dominate, win, and then leave. The military, as on the individual level, is only in the country for 6 months for special operations to a year for a standard deployment for the regular army. And they maintain little to no relation with the host nation personnel on a general level. And they're deeply results oriented, and they are much more focused on the operational and tactical level objectives. So, what do we do with this? What's the solution? How do we work forward for this? And so as we can see, these differences make some significant challenges for enacting foreign policy when we're abroad. You've got your competitive, results-driven military who thinks that diplomats are useless. And then you got the relationship-focused State Department types who think that the military are a bunch of cavemen. And both of them think they're right. And both of them think that the other side is the one sabotaging the relationship. See, each agency has its own focus, has its own objectives, has its own way of solving problems. The Department of War is our hammer, and to them, everything looks like a nail. And the Department of State is more like a screwdriver that likes a little bit more of a delicate approach, right? And so we as individuals, we tend to get stuck in this like tunnel vision, right? We become hyper fixated on our own personal objectives and the mission of our respective organization. And what happens is we end up losing sight of the bigger picture, right? We get stuck in using our preferred conflict strategy and we think that our outcome is the best, when really we need to see that different tools are needed to accomplish different jobs and roles. So what's the fix? How do we solve this, right? Well, first, we need to recognize that our preferred approach isn't always the right approach for every situation. Just because you're really good with a hammer doesn't mean that every single problem is a nail. Second, understand that the person whose approach drives us crazy probably is solving for something that we're not even thinking of, right? So the State Department, they're not being weak. They're protecting a decades-long relationship. In the military, they're not being reckless. They're solving an immediate tactical threat. And third, this is the hard part. We need to learn to ask, what is this situation actually calling for? Not what am I comfortable with doing, but what does this problem need? Because sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a screwdriver, and sometimes, and this is the real leadership move, right, is knowing when you need to step aside and let someone else use their tool that's more appropriate, even if you think your way might work too. Because the mission, it doesn't care about our ego, right? The mission cares about results, and the best results come from knowing when to lead, knowing when to support, but most importantly, knowing when to get out of the way. So for our closing sequence, right, here's what we've covered. The US government has a lot of powerful tools in the form of defense, diplomacy, and development. Each one of these is focused on a different conflict style and employs different types of personalities that are all designed to treat a wide variety of situations and problems. But in the end, they're supposed to work together as a whole of government approach. But what ends up happening is instead of collaborating, they end up spending half of their time fighting each other rather than addressing the specific outcome. The military thinks the State Department's weak, the State Department thinks the military is reckless, and then the mission suffers because everyone is convinced that their way is the only way forward. But here's the thing, this isn't just a government problem. It's baked into human nature. We all do this. We all get that tunnel vision, right? We all fall in love with our own approach. And we start believing that our tool, our team, our way of solving a problem is the best way to do it. And when this happens, we stop asking, what does this situation actually need? And we start asking, how do I prove that I'm right? And this isn't leadership. This is us indulging in our ego. So if you take nothing else from this episode, take away these 3 things, right? Step 1, zoom out. Take time to regularly step back from your specific work and take a look at the bigger picture. What am I doing today on the tactical level? How does that fit into my team's goal on the operational level? How does my team's work serve the organization's mission at the strategic level? Just because something makes perfect sense on our specific level doesn't mean it's the best approach for the system as a whole. 2, we want to recognize that different doesn't mean wrong. The person whose approach that's driving us crazy is probably solving for something that we're not even seeing. The overly cautious person might be protecting an interest that we would really regret losing. And that reckless person might be responding to a threat that we haven't even noticed yet. We want different tools to address different problems on purpose. We don't want a toolbox with just 17 different hammers. And then lastly, 3rd, know when your tool isn't the right tool. If the military built my toolbox, it would just be a bunch of hammers. If USAID built my toolbox, it would just be a wad of cash. Neither is a complete skill set, right? The best toolboxes and the best leaders, they have range. They know when to use a hammer. They know when they need to use a screwdriver. But most of all, they know when to step aside and let someone else take the lead. The key isn't being the best at one thing. It's knowing which thing the situation actually needs. Because at the end of the day, the mission doesn't care about our ego. It's not about us or our preferred approach or how right we think we are, right? The mission cares about results. And the best results come from people who care more about winning together than being right alone. All right, so here's what I want to know. In your organization, who's the military and who's the State Department? Drop a comment and tell me which department at your company you can't stand and which one you are. If you know someone who thinks their department is the only one that gets it, send them this video in a totally not passive-aggressive way, right? And if you want more frameworks just like this that actually help you become a better leader, not just feel motivated and inspired, hit that subscribe button because we got new episodes dropping every 2 weeks that are going to level up your leadership game. All right, so for our final quote and sign off, we got 2 of them today. First one's coming from Abraham Maslow, who said, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And then the second one comes from General George S. Patton, who says, if everyone is thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking. Anyhow, until next time, keep forging your path. That's all I got for you guys. Lux Via, my friends.